In Mexico and Brazil, they have developed conditional cash transfer programs. They are what they say on the tin. Cash is given to women of low income, but there are conditions. Children have to be taken to nutrition and health clinics, older children have to remain in school. In Brazil, the result has been great reductions in poverty and inequality, improvements in school attendance, especially of girls, and health improvements. Questions have been raised as to whether the conditionality is needed. Political activists and thinkers across a broad array of ideologies, from libertarians to social liberals to the hard left, are intrigued, or even keen. The Cato Institute, an American think tank which spends much of its time calling for a smaller state, published a sympathetic analysis of the policy in 2015. It feels that, though it might prefer a world with no government redistribution, a basic income is the simplest. Migrant children who do attend schools in cities usually get a worse education than their city-born counterparts. State schools that accept migrant pupils often operate what Pei Chia Lan of National Taiwan University refers to as apartheid school models. In these, migrant children are taught separately from urban ones in the same school, and are even kept apart from them in the playground. As yet, the new explanation is incomplete. So far, the researchers have only computed the effects caused by one property of matter falling into a black hole, its electric charge. They have not shown the effect of its mass, which would also be important. Their calculations therefore account only for part of the information that is lost. But they have established a principle that may lead to a full accounting of the matter. That would let physicists sleep easy in their beds, in the knowledge that reality is once again behaving, at least approximately, how they think it ought to. How to look after all these elderly folks is a different problem. Governments around the world are already struggling to support growing numbers of retired people who depend on a shrinking working population. 18 OECD countries have raised pension ages. At the same time, workers are being asked to dig deeper into their own pockets. None of this is enough. In this method, a laser is used to create a line of ionization by removing electrons from atoms. This laser is then directed at storm clouds in order to control electrical charges, a method which is less dangerous than using rockets. As protection for the lasers, the beams are aimed firstly at mirrors. In Italy, some of these cities were able to gain control of the surrounding country and to become city-states, resembling those of the ancient Greeks. Their autonomy was assisted by the continuing struggle between popes and emperors, between church and state, again, a thoroughly unique Western experience. In these states, the modern world began to take form. Although the people were mainly Christians, their life and outlook became increasingly secular. Here, and not only in Italy but in other cities north of the Alps, arose a worldview that celebrated the greatness and dignity of mankind, which was a very sharp turning away from the medieval Western tradition that put God and life in the hereafter at the center of everything. The next topic is going to be black holes, and this is a similar situation. 15, 20 years ago black holes were sort of poised precariously on the boundary between theoretical physics and science fiction. A boundary that is more porous than you might believe. But again, in the past 15 years or so this has been converted into a standard topic in observational astronomy. There are dozens, probably hundreds of objects we can point to in the sky and say, yes, those things are black holes. And so now, the current topic of research is, do these things that we are pretty sure are black holes actually behave in the incredibly bizarre, science fiction manner that the theoretical physicists have been talking about for the past 30 or 40 years? So, to what extent are these very exotic behaviors actually manifested in real life? In 1962, an English political scientist and journalist by the name of Bernard Crick wrote a short and very polemical and influential little book called In Defense of Politics, and by politics Crick meant a distinctive type of human activity where conflicts of interests among groups are adjudicated by discussion, persuasion, and debate rather than by force or by fright. Now, the emergence of tropical medicine marked a transition, a transformation, from something that had preceded it, and that I hope won't be confusing. But from the middle of the 18th century, more or less, until the closing decade of the 19th century, there had been an older tradition that can be summarized under the label of diseases of the tropics. And there were a couple of classic statements of this older tradition. One was a work, an important work, by James Lind, an 18th-century physician, who wrote an essay on diseases incidental to Europeans in hot climates, and this was built on the experience of Europeans in the West Indies. And then there was another work by James Johnson called The Influence of Tropical Climates on European Constitutions, built on the experience of Europeans in India. Demand for this exotic fabric eventually created the lucrative trade route now known as the Silk Road, taking silk westward and bringing gold, silver, and wool to the east. It was named the Silk Road after its most precious commodity, which was considered to be worth more than gold. The Silk Road stretched over 6,000 kilometers from eastern China to the Mediterranean Sea, following the Great Wall of China, climbing the Pamir mountain range, crossing modern-day Afghanistan and going on to the Middle East, with a major trading market in Damascus. To biomedical researchers all over the world, twins offer a precious opportunity to untangle the influence of genes and environment, of nature and nurture. Because identical twins come from a single egg that splits into two, they share virtually the same genetic code. Any differences between them, one twin having younger-looking skin, for example, must be due to environmental factors such as less time spent in the sun. Language often seems so skillfully drafted that one can hardly imagine it as anything other than the perfected handiwork of a master craftsman. How else could this instrument make so much out of barely 3 dozen measly morsels of sound? In themselves, these configurations of mouth, P, F, B, V, T, D, K, G, SH, A, E, and so on, amount to nothing more than a few haphazard spits and splutters, random noises with no meaning, no ability to express, no power to. An Egyptian narrative of about 1080 BC, the story of one Amen, provides an insight into the scale of their trading activity. One of the characters is Werkati, a Phoenician merchant living at Tanis in Egypt's Nile Delta. As many as 50 ships carry out his business, plying back and forth between the Nile and the Phoenician port of Sidon. The most prosperous period for Phoenicia was the 10th century BC, when the surrounding region was stable. I'm responsible for student admissions to the college and I use a computer system to help process student enrollments and to do the timetabling. But it really doesn't suit the way we work these days. It's over 10 years old, and although it was fine when it was first introduced, it is just not good enough now. 20 years ago, the college was quite small and we didn't have the number of students and tutors that we have now. There's a lot more data now, and it sometimes seems the system has crashed but, in fact, it just takes ages to go from one screen to the next.